Hello, my name is Karin Wells, and I'm talking to you today from Port Hope, Ontario. It's about 100 kilometers east of Toronto, and I'm here to talk about my book. It's called The Abortion Caravan: When Women Shut Down Government in the Battle for the Right to Choose. And whoops, that's what it looks like. That's the front, and on the back is a photograph of a Volkswagen van. On the top, that black thing, that's a coffin, and I will tell you more about that in a minute. First, I really want to thank Octopus Books in Ottawa for partnering on this virtual launch. Can't do in-person visits to bookstores and things like that, so this is what we've invented. We're making it up as we go along. Thank you, Octopus Books, a bookstore that has been around for a very long time. The Abortion Caravan was made up of 3 vehicles and 17 young women. Let me tell you about the young women first. It was out of Vancouver. The young women most of them were young, in their 20s. They were very strong leftists, very politically motivated. And they decided at the time that it was a time when everybody wanted to change the world. Well, many people wanted to change the world. They were particularly concerned and wanted to change the conditions under which women lived their lives. Many different issues interested them. They traveled in this caravan in 3 different vehicles. There was a Pontiac Parisienne convertible, great big boat of a thing, a pickup truck with large, huge loudspeakers on either side, and the Volkswagen van. And the issue that they wanted to go after government on was abortion. They had decided that abortion affected a broader cross-section of women across Canada than any other issue. This was not the daycare caravan. It was not the equal pay for equal work caravan. It was the abortion caravan. Abortion was an offense under the criminal code. Women weren't often prosecuted for even seeking an abortion. Doctors, and this was the major thing, doctors were prosecuted, tried, convicted, jailed, and lost their medical licenses. So the result of all that was that because women couldn't get medically safe abortions, they resorted, and abortions have always been there. The records back in the time of ancient Greece to abortion. It's always been something that was unfortunate but necessary. So women had to turn to backstreet abortionists, to illegal abortions. They aborted themselves. And as a result, many women died. They suffered infections, hemorrhages. Even more were rendered infertile and had a dreadful time. The coffin on top of that Volkswagen van, the coffin symbolized the estimated 1,000 to 2,000 women a year who died as a result of illegal abortion in Canada. They decided that abortion cut across more lines in this country than any other issue. It happened to women in every geographic region, pertained to young women, to older women who thought they'd had their families and couldn't afford perhaps another baby, and were very concerned about another pregnancy when they were that much older. Rich women, poor women. Rich women had an easier time because they tended to be able to fly to other jurisdictions where abortion was legal. So that was the thinking. They set out from Vancouver, important it was from Vancouver, in these 3 vehicles, and they stopped, I think it was 10 different places along the way. The United Church put them up, so they unrolled their sleeping bags on very hard floors of church halls. They staged guerrilla theater, they held rallies, and every time they came into town, they made a lot of noise. They were demanding attention. They were like the circus coming to town. They worked with local groups to set up the meetings, but they were the flash, they were the star attraction. And off they went. All sorts of things happened to them along the way. And the women individually were very different sorts of people. That was one thing that interested me a great deal. Who were these women? Why did they do what they did? And I pursue that in the book. By the time they got to Ottawa, they were 500 strong. They were demanding of government. Pierre Trudeau was the prime minister. They demanded of him, of the justice minister, of the health minister, that abortion be removed from the criminal code. It wasn't a matter of asking. This was thumping their fists and saying, we demand this. They weren't polite, this group of women. They marched on the Hill. Government didn't meet them. There was no meeting with government. 3 NDP members of parliament, I think, came to talk to them, and 1 conservative, but no one from the Liberal government. They left Parliament Hill very angry, and rather than just going back to their cars and kind of feeling miserable, they came off the hill, they turned left. They went down that hill to the Chateau Laurier, they turned left again, and they continued to march down Sussex Drive. And I want to read you a bit from the book about what they did next. It's about 1.5 miles from Parliament Hill to 24 Sussex Drive, not a short walk. It took this group of by then 300 people, some of them women pushing baby carriages, half an hour to make that walk. They marched past Ottawa's Byward Market, past the Notre Dame Basilica with its 2 tin-covered spires. They went round the corner and followed along the Ottawa River, past the Department of External Affairs and the Ottawa City Hall across the Rideau River. They were singing and chanting, making noise all the way. Half an hour, 300 women with an Ottawa police motorcycle escort. It would have been impossible, you would think, not to know that they were coming. Yet when they reached 24 Sussex Drive, the Prime Minister's official residence, the gates were wide open and there were only four RCMP officers standing in the driveway. Once again, the march spontaneously turned left, never breaking stride, and with the momentum of 300 women behind them, they pushed their way in. Marcy Cohen, one of the Vancouver leaders, was in the front row. We just linked arms and walked in. The RCMP didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do, so they did nothing. The Mounties were caught flat-footed. By then, several hundred women and a few men were comfortably settled on the Prime Minister's front lawn, with children running about and baby buggies parked nearby. One of the RCMP officers said that this was the first time anyone had managed to make their way up the driveway onto the lawn. Plenty had tried. Several hundred women camped out on the Prime Minister's lawn added up to a politically sensitive situation, in light particularly of the Kent State shootings 5 days earlier. Kent State was a university in Ohio in the United States. There had been a huge anti-war in Vietnam demonstration in Kent State, the demonstrations that went out across the United States. And at Kent State, the Ohio National Guard opened fire on the demonstration. They killed 4 students, 2 of them, and this was immensely shocking, both to Americans and Canadians. 2 of them were young women, one was 19 and one was 20. Everybody was acutely aware of this. So a politically sensitive situation in light of the Kent State shootings, a very sensitive situation. RCMP Sub-Inspector E.H. Treffy made a judgment call and decided that photographs of the Mounties and members of the Ottawa Police Force forcibly removing young women, at least one of whom was pregnant, and children from the Prime Minister's lawn would not play well in Canada's newspapers. There was at least one press photographer, Errol Young, with them. When contacted, Pierre Trudeau apparently did not disagree. The women showed no signs of leaving voluntarily. More police arrived, and at least 15 officers were now standing in a line between the women and the house. The lawn was crowded. Chris Purdy, a young woman from Toronto, was in the front row, sitting cross-legged, her eyes level with the knees of a policeman. He was standing between her and the house. For some reason, she put her hand out and touched his foot. "I remember the boots of the guy," she said. "We were so innocent in many ways. I remember I reached forward and grabbed the guy's shoelaces, and he started stepping on my fingers. It was this funny little interaction. And we both retreated, and I kept my hands to myself. We sat there for a long time. I guess I was naive." They were all naive. It was absolutely astounding that they pulled off this entire project. There was no social media. Long distance phone calls were too expensive for them. The women in Ottawa, who were their contacts, who put up all the posters around town, had never met these women coming in in this convoy, this caravan. They just had blind faith that this was something worth doing. And so all these women from across the country came together and did it. So by the end of the afternoon, the Prime Minister's residence, the rain was starting to come down. Everybody was feeling kind of miserable. So they left and they went back to the school where they were billeted, several hundred of them still, and they had a meeting that went on for 16 hours. They came to a decision that they would invade the galleries of the House of Commons, and to do that, they needed passes from sitting members of Parliament. To get those passes, nobody was going to give them to them voluntarily. So they had contacts on the Hill, women who worked there. They got the contacts, they forged the signatures of the MPs, and they got themselves into the galleries of the House. They chained themselves to their seats, and they began the speech. They all had the same speech. And when one woman was shut down and removed, another woman would take up the speech. The guards said they were popping up all over the place, and they were. They kept it up loud enough, long enough, that the speaker eventually had to close down the session. And the next day, this whole affair was on the front page of every newspaper in the country. They wanted attention. They had got attention. Nobody had been listening to them. They said abortion, the law regarding abortion is unjust, is not right, it should be changed. No one was listening. Now they were listening. And this is a story in our history, if you like, that we, for the most part, have forgotten, which reminds me that I really do want to thank, first of all, the group of women, and more than 40, who talked to me, told me, oh, these very intimate personal stories. Let me borrow photographs, let me read their journals. They were immensely generous in spirit. They wanted this story told, so thank you. And a thanks to a group called the Feminist History Society that backs publication of stories about women in this country. Stories from our history that probably would be forgotten. The story also raises the question, and just let me leave you with this, when is it the right thing to do to color outside the lines, to take to the streets, to undertake what they call direct action? When is that the only alternative, and when is that the most effective way to make change? It was then. Thank you. The Abortion Caravan, When Women Shut Down Government in the Battle for the Right to Choose, by Karin Wells. Thank you. Bye-bye.